This is the second webinar this year. The last one was in February. It was a really good one, I think. In February was we had some talks at the Substation Design Suite Industry Consortium last month, and there's a couple talks on there as well. So today's webinar, we're going to be talking about model states, and that's the key thing with Inventor 22 and Inventor 2023, those two releases, and that's what we are focusing on today. What we're also going to be talking about, I have a list, we will talk about Inventor, SDS Physical for Inventor 8.1. So right now we're all running 8.0.2. 8.1 should be released as early as today. We're having a meeting on it, and I'll find out for sure later on today. But it will be released this week for all that I can see. We're all set up to go. So 8.1 should be released, and we'll have a little talk about that today. And I have my little bonus feature here that I noticed, and I threw on at the end of the webinar. So really today is all about the model states, and then we'll talk a little bit about the 8.1 release. So model states is a huge change in Inventor from levels of detail where we used to have in model states, replaced them. And if you look at this image here that we're looking at, make sure I'm on select tool. If you look here, you can see that I have instance model states, I have suppression model states, right? And I'm calling it, these are my names that I'm calling it, all right? And we can see that we have two circuit breakers. These two circuit breakers are the same file. These two islands, subassembly islands, they're also the same file. So let's go in and look at the model itself. So I've created this model. Let's get this screen bigger. I don't know why I didn't set it bigger. Okay, so I created this model to talk about model states and design checks. You can see, first of all, there's a false transformer. The false transformer was talked about in previous design check webinars. So if you want to be familiar with that, you can look in the previous webinars on that. If I come into the edit equipment data, I can select that false transformer, and you can see it's identified as a power transformer with the voltage required. So a lot of times we use a false transformer just to place it and test a small section of our station instead of testing the entire station. What we also have are two circuit breakers, and we'll take a look at those. This circuit breaker, you can see it's a little taller than the other circuit breaker, but if we look at the I properties, you'll see that this circuit breaker is the same name, same file name as this circuit breaker. And this is the cool thing about the model states, all right, that we can do this sort of thing. So if we expand the bill of material, or I shouldn't say the browser, you can see in the browser, we have assembly bay, and here's my bay. All right, so I'm skeleton. So let's go in to the bay. You can see I have a bay, and I have a breaker assembly, and it's the same file name as this breaker assembly, but they have different model states. One has a model states equal to 16, and that's the 16-inch space at the bottom here. And this one has a model states of 9, which is the 9-inch spacing at the bottom here. What it's also doing is it's changing the I properties. It's changing the I properties as well as the height, the parameters, and we're able to do that. Once we have a model state and it's the same part, what happens with design checks? And we know we have suppression items in the part of the design check. So we'll need to get into that as well today. But first of all, we're just going to run the design checks in case I break this before we get into that point. And you can see I have the transformer, I have the equipment, so it's identifying both equipment, even though they're the same file name. So that's a change we had to do with the 2022 release. We have the structures, and we have some insulators. Of course, I only have the low side showing, so I only have the low side phasing identified. So we can run this design checks, and it won't take too long, but you can see the suppression, and it's important that we have that suppression correctly on both models, and that's part of what we're going to talk about today, to make sure we have suppression on both models. We're often going to have two models with different tagging if we're going to be using and leveraging the tools in model space, model states, but we also can change it in the parameter height. So those are the two key things we want to talk about later on tonight. So you can see we've run our design checks. We can come into our design checks and we can see what's happening. We can see what was tested. Here was that bus pipe. This bus pipe here has been tested to this structure for phase to ground. And that's what we ran is phase to ground. Here we can see the circuit breaker was tested to the cable here. So we're able to pass that test. I can sort on pass fail. If you want more detail on the design checks, go to the other webinars, which I get much more detail. This one I just really want to focus on the model states and how they're running. But I want to show you that it is running, that we have items turning on and off, and that they're both the same part and it's selected. So there's some work we had to do to release it in SDS for Inventor 8.1 that's coming out. So there's some work we had to do to be able to allow those items to happen. So let's go back to the PDF. I'm just going to go back here. We're going to come into what I'm talking about when I'm talking about model states. I'm talking about suppression and instance model states. I see the model states as two different things. When we had level of detail was really only suppression. It wasn't really doing anything else but suppression of parts. Once we have these model states, we have instances of model states. And by the way, I understand that SolidWorks has model states as well, and they've had it for a little while. So that's why I think we see it in Inventor now. So we have instance and suppression, and these are my words, not Inventor words or Autodesk words, but this is the way I'm looking at things. So if I come back into my model, let's look at it. I still have my foundations laid out. I'm just going to close and reopen it. Don't like what happened there. You know how things work with live webinars. So when we look at the model states here, you can see my model states. This is my general arrangement. We'll say we have the bay as a subassembly, and we still have my foundation structures and main. So if I identify my bay model state, which is going to work like a level of detail, and it's just going to suppress the items for foundations only. I can come into my model state for structures, activate, and there's my structures, and I have my main that I may want. I often have a main level of detail. I was going to say it's model state. I often have a main model state for the GA drawings and such. You can see all those turned on and off. We didn't even affect the other parts because they're inside the bay. If we expand the bay and look at the bay, we have our model states as primary. That's another thing they changed. It used to be master was the top default name for it. Now it's primary. But you can see each of these breakers have their own model state set in them. I'm going to expand it. You can see the model state, and you can see the model state 16. It's grayed out. I can't change it here. I got to go to the lower assembly to change it. But that is 16. And this, again, the 16 is the spacing, height spacing between the bottom of the circuit breaker and the top of the concrete. And you can see that with the next one. If I expand the next model state, you'll see that in here. It's 9 inches. and you can see the model state is set to 9. But that's of the assembly. Notice it's the assembly. If I go down to the breaker itself, that's foundation, that's the breaker, you can see that has a model state. So in the past, in the level of detail, our level of detail only worked in assemblies. Now our level of detail is going to work, our model state's going to work in the part. And you can see I got H09, I got H16, 24, I got H minimum. So I have different heights here set for these. And then I can change them out when I go to that lower level. So when we're thinking of strategizing our general arrangement and our substation, we have our tagging that we want to put on our circuit breaker. Each circuit breaker is going to have a distinct tag. Each circuit breaker might have a different height, as these do, these cabinets do, but not all of them have that. But there might be some other information we have in that. Or if we have CCVTs or something, we have 25, or it'll probably be around at 3, but let's say we have 24 CCVTs in there, they're all going to have a different tag. Well, we can have one model, and using that one model, having all kinds of different model states to that. So one of the things that slow Inventor down with large assemblies, which substations are large assemblies. I come down to here, it's the number of, not the number of occurrences, but the number of parts. So this model here has 69 parts and 798 occurrences. All right, so 69 parts. When that 69 parts gets over 3,000, you have to have a good computer to handle that. So we want to keep that number down. In a lot of substations, because we're repeatedly using things, we're able to keep that number down. Number of parts, number of occurrences, it can go up to 60,000. Who cares? It doesn't really affect it so much, but it's the number of parts that affect the performance of the large assembly. So by using the model state, we can reduce the number. We can reduce the number of models and thus have a better performance of our stations, especially the large ones. A lot of times this doesn't matter on the smaller stations, right? But on the larger ones, it certainly does. All right, so I want to get in, I have a little script I had to write for this one. So I want to get into the island assembly. So I'm going to open up an island assembly. And there's my island assembly for my, for this model states. If I activate this model state, we can activate this one. And of course, it's same as level of detail. You're supposed to save it at each time you change it. You can see it went higher and all the connectors went with it. So if I come back to this one, activate, and there it is. So if I come up into iProperties, you know what, 2023 doesn't remember the iProperties in the shortcut menu. Oh, by the way, I wanted to point that out. So I want to point this out before we go further, before we go any further. Okay, I am running 2023.0.1 Inventor, and I am running 8.1 Inventor, Substation Design Suite for Inventor. So this is the new release. It could be released today. I'm having a meeting this afternoon, but I think it will be more like Thursday or worse Friday, but I think Thursday we'll see it. But wanted to point that out. So when I'm changing this, I'm going 16 to 19, right? If you look at what's going on here, I have a component pattern for the fittings. And these fittings all have their hardware attached to the fittings. And I'm changing it with them. In this case, I did not add a parameter to change the height. I instead added the fittings to my component. So when I have all the fittings turned on, I'm going to have twice as many fittings, twice as much hardware, but it doesn't matter because I'm running it from model states. If I come into primary, I set up the primary model state to have no fittings and to sit at its lowest level. So it's clear that this is not a dedicated model space, model state. Come into my custom properties. I have no tag in here. Oh no, it's not that. I wanted to look at this. Sorry, guys. It is properties of the part, custom. Tag 1 is SDH01. Okay, so that's what it is. It's the lowest setting, H01. Then you can have this whatever you want. So when I come into this model state, I'll activate this. And now when we come up to the properties, custom of the part, not of the assembly, you can see my tag is SDH09. So the 9 has changed is the parameter, and this has also changed. The parameter is being changed by model states. I just have the parameter being placed into the, I gotta open up the part. Let's open up the part. The parameter is being placed into the, here's my leg height, 9 inches, and it's copied into my properties. That's why you see it in the properties, but it's being driven by model states, this number here. And then the property, if we change that, here I got different ones. I got 24 inch, and you can see that that property will change in here as well. SDH24. So I'm changing the tag in the parameter. If we look further, let's keep going. I just want to see what else drawn. Oh, the drawing parts list. That's what I want to look at next. I will get deeper into the model state part in a minute. I want to get into the drawing, so I'm going to open up the drawing. Here's my drawing for this model state, for this island circuit breaker. So I have the island circuit breaker. I can double click on here, and you can see that we can edit this, and I can have different model states in here. Sorry, this one. Okay, so this is set to number 9. You can see the tag is H09, the height is 9. If I change it to 24, now the height is 24, the tag is changed. So everything's changing for us in here, and I'm doing it from the drawing world. On this case, this is the assembly, and we're going to look at the assembly here. I want to make sure we see the bill of material change. So I'm going to come in here, and I'm going to change this model state. Now I only have the 2 available, so I still have the foundation, so I can still have my foundation model state. I can still have maybe a structure model state. This doesn't have structure. Or I can have my 9-inch model state, and I'll say okay. I want to yes and replace overrides, and I'll get a new bill of material based on that number. All right. When I come in here and change it to maybe number 16, I'll get that bill of material will update for that 16. So if the bill of material was different for those 2 model states for the assembly, that's what will happen. So one of the things what we get with Inventor 2023, with 2023, which isn't in 2022. So when we look at the bill of material, we get this tool here, this BOM settings. And I like this tool. I want this tool. So if we come into here, we got hide, suppress components, and BOM. I have that turned on, and renumber items sequentially. So it's renumbering our item numbers along here. and it's going to hide suppressed components. So in 2022, when you do this model states thing here that I was just showing you in the drawing world, when we hit into here and I change it from 16 to 9, I can have zeros in my bill of material. And if then I'd have to turn off those zeros. I'd have to turn I'd have to edit the bill of material and make my line invisible, right? I don't have to in 2023. We don't want zeros in our bill of material because it will go to purchasing or whoever's going to order the component and they'll see a zero and they won't understand what zero means. Maybe it's infinite and they'll buy an infinite number of circuit breakers or something. So we don't want that to happen. So I really like this aspect coming out of Inventor 2023 is this tool here, BOM settings. So you can see what's changing. The parts list will change with the model state in here as well. I have, if I come in here and change it to primary, you can see the number of washers dropped because there's only 8 for the 2 grounding items down here. You can see all the bolting is gone, all the fittings we had come up in here. I'll change it to structures or foundations. Now this wasn't changing it because I didn't change it as a global change when I changed it for structures. And then I can come into my MS9. And now I have all my CEF core fittings in here now. So we're going to go into the next page. We're 25 after. I want to leave some time left. So I'm going to come down in this next page. So when we look at the model states of the part, here we're looking at the model state of just the part. And we're looking at member, leg, and tag. There is a table in that model state. So I'm going to come into the model state of anything of all of these. There is a table. So if I edit via spreadsheet, it's kind of like the eye parts. You can see I have the different model states in here. So I got foundation structures and MS9, MS16, and it's telling me what part is being done what. Suppress, compute, and you can come along and you can make your own changes into here and override what is happening. You can see all those fittings, all those inserts were changed. It's up to AT is the column back here at the end. So there's quite a few things that can change. So I don't usually edit anything in the assemblies because there's so many items that can change. But if I wanted to, I certainly could. When we get into the part, and we look at the part model states by spreadsheet, you can see it's a lot simpler. So here I'm changing my leg height. I got my primary name. I can create a new name if I want. Let's make that bigger. I can create a new name if I want, or I can add whatever I want for my tagging. I can do it right here. And of course, I can copy that out. So if you look at this example I made here, let's go into this tag plate. So I have my tag plate. So if you look at my model, I have my tag plates on here. And I put these on as suppression style. So when I change the height, the tag plate is suppressed and the other one is unsuppressed. So I put a constraint on that, dimensional constraint of 76 inches from the bottom. So when it's suppressed, it's done that way. So I took this as a suppression model state, but you could also make it into a instance model state. So if you look at this tag plate here, I'm going to expand it. If you have our training models, you have this tag plate, by the way. But if I can come in here and change this tag plate to whatever I want in my model states, right? if I can come, I can have that then link into my model state of my assembly. Instead of having the suppression, which I did in this example, you could do it this way as well. But this is a good way to see the spreadsheet tools. Is now what I worked it into the spreadsheet tools. I haven't seen this. Okay, this built it out. When you come into the spreadsheet tools, you can see what I did here. I have normal Excel equations in here saying the tag is the value of these cells. Okay, so that's my member name. I'm changing the member name by the cells in here. So the member name is this. So if we come into here, this number is being computed by my offsets here. And this one is just the number above plus 1. So if I wanted to make more of these, now I'm at 8, 9. So if I were to add more, I can just come down here and pull this down. I don't have multiple digits, so I'd have to go back to 0, 1. All right. So I'm just using normal Excel data in here. Save that. So I've added to these higher numbers here, right up to 7 and 8. We close this, and now I got right down here to 7 and 8. So it's really nice to do. It's nicer than I thought it would be. So it's nice to be able to just tablize that and go through it. So again, in the assembly, it was quite a lot in there, but it doesn't mean you can't do it. It's just mean there were a lot of items in this example. But in this smaller example, it's really nice to see that. So let's go back into the document. So this is what I'm showing here. You got model state name. You can drive it from the table, the name. You can drive the parameter, iProperty once you set it up, and you can go with this. Now this is all done in edit member scope. So we need to talk about edit member scope and edit factory scope. So these two terms here, they're two different meanings, obviously. So when we come into this model, you can see I have a pencil tool for only this one here. Let's put that closer together. I only have a pencil tool for this one here. So if we come into manage, there's a pull down here. So edit factory scope or edit member scope. So if I change anything to this model now, and I'm in edit member scope, I can only change this model state. But if I go and edit factory scope, anything I do to this model is going to change all of my model states. And you can see a pencil to all of those. So if you double click the pencil, or you just single click it, actually. I always like that window to come up to remind me. So this is the type of thing that you can work with. You can change them all or just change that one instance. So that's what I'm talking about, instance model states. We're just looking at one instance. So when we're doing design check prep, so let's look at our part again. Let's go back into our part here. We have in the part here, what we want to do is suppress items in the model states. So if I come into SD model editor, and you recall this from our training or other webinars, this is our SD model editor to prepare for model states. So right now it's a circuit breaker. So if I change this, I want to make sure I change it to all of, well, it doesn't really matter because it's saved in the part file, so it's not going to change. Location points. Location points, when we show our terminals, to recall, when we show our terminals, it's going to remember wherever I place those terminals. So that's the way it is right now. I'm not sure if this is going to change because it's not really all that important for doing the design checks. It's more of a visual to see the terminals. So right now I'm not too worried about it, but those I put on at the 24-inch height, right? And that's where it's going to remember them for that model state. These aren't tied to a parameter, so we can't change them in here. Now the clearance stuff, so if we toggle the clearance check, you can see I'm toggling it here. I have to do that for the model states. All right, so let's go back to the, so we have three aspects: the attributes, which is that it's a circuit breaker, the terminal location points, which were the green terminals, and then we've got clearance suppression. This is done using the SDS model editor. So clearance suppression can be done for all model states. When creating suppressions, the model must be in edit factory scope. All right, edit factory scope. So if we want these clearances, these suppressions for the clearances to work, we want to do the suppression in factory scope. So that is this one. All right, and once we do those suppressions, it will be in all of the states that we make. So you may want to make your model states for the changes you want before you do the suppression. All right. So you want to do the suppressions in factory scope and probably after you make all of your type ones you want. Otherwise, you have to go into each one and edit each new one that you make. Turn that off. So let's go back to the document. All right. So that's it that I have on working with model states and design checks. There's factory scope, edit member scope. That's stuff to practice. We have the tables that we can use. We can still have our suppression of our model states, and we still have link model state. We have, remember, link level of detail, a beautiful tool. Well, we can still link our model states. It's still in there. It hasn't changed. Let's come into manage. Oh, no, 3D model. Oh, I'm in a single part. Right, we have linked model states. It still works the same way. Right, and we can link these up just like level of detail did. And typically we can have all that level of detail tools that we had in the past, and we can also carry them into instance model states where we can change parameters individually in I properties individually. So I think it's a pretty powerful tool to keep the number of components down, what I was talking about before. If we can keep those components down, we don't need as powerful machines, and we can share our models with people who don't have the latest hardware. I'm going to move on to the next point. We have 1236. So the other point we were going to bring up was not model states, physical for 8.1. So when I set up this webinar, I went faster through it than what I was planning, because I had so many people asking me, am I going to talk about 8.1? Right? So at the SDS IC meeting we had last month, I did talk about it, and there it's on our it is on. I'm going to put this in the chat as well. It is on our YouTube site. It hasn't been posted yet to the SDSIC yet. I think there's a lot of work to do there, and it's a little bit behind, but that webinar is available, where I go in a little more detail than what I can do today. Where's my link? There it goes. So here's that webinar here. It's hour long, and I talk about 8.1 through most of it. At the end, I talk about model states again because I'm so excited about model states. Anyway, so I get into the release of 8.1. And look, there's a like already on it, was just put up. So SDS Physical for Inventor 8.1, we now support 22 and 2023. All right, you saw I was working on 2023. We are supporting those two. What we also did, we split the database into two. We have an application database and a user database, and you can see a picture of it in here. This application database, which is the old database name, right, contains a configuration for SDS and can be renamed, saved to a network location, and be made read-only. So this was to work with IT departments who wanted a central location of the database so the whole team can read one database from one location and they're all reading the same one. So what we had to do then is move all the settings of SDS for Inventor, all our user settings into the user database. So we have the two databases. So when we look at the content editor, we still have this. This is reading the application database. All right, so this is the application database reading that. The user database is just the information that we pick in here. So picking up your settings, what template you're going to use, any default folders, settings for your cable and wire, whatever. So it's only those. So you can have your own user database, each individually, or you can have a central one if you wanted. But the idea here is that we have an application database that can be set remotely, placed read-only. You can put it in your vault and have it checked out of vault or copied out of vault, and being able to update it easily that way if that's the way you want to work. A number of people don't put it in vault, they put it just in a secure server area. Just depends on what your workflow is. And of course that can be changed at startup. We also have a tool to turn this off so that no one can change the database settings. It can always be this one. The user database can always be changed. It can always be changed to different ones. So we envision that some users, not all, will have a database specific for different customers, and they can use that, and then you can create a settings database for those different customers if you wish. You don't have to, right? You can still use your same one, but you're going to have to pick the cable. If you pick a cable that's not in the database, you're going to get the first cable in the list. But then you can change it and pick whatever you want. So the application of the application database can be centrally managed by IT and admin. What I get a lot of questions is on the migration of the database. The application database is different than the old SD3DB file. It's different, but it will work fine in the release we have now of 8.1. You do not have to migrate it, all right? Having said that, you may want to migrate it because we're not sure if it's going to stay that way in the next release. We might start leveraging things out of that, changing it, and using it more. So I would recommend to migrate it, but there's no rush to do so. You can run now without migrating it. You can run off and do it now. Change your upgrade to 8.1 and forget about the database. Don't worry about it. But in the future, you may want to do it when you have time, when you're at your leisure. So to migrate it, I created a document. It's on our portal now. It's pretty direct. I think most of you can guess what it's going to be. It's just copy out your to the I think it's in here, physical databases. This document here, physical database, and talk about the databases in here. The same thing I'm saying, application and user. Coming down here, I have to migrate the database. So basically, to migrate the database, it's in this tool if you want to follow through that, but it's really what you're doing is exporting to CSV. We fixed up in the 8.1 release the export to CSV to handle quotations better, other symbols better, and it should handle anything you put in there, I hope. But we fixed that up so that is available, and then you import it. One thing you got to remember when you're exporting the database, you need to have the custom iProperties. And when you're importing the database, you have to place the custom iProperty headers in here first. The fields can be blank, but name, you got to have a name in the headers, and then you can import anything with those same custom iProperties. And that's written in that document I showed you before. Go back into here. Last thing is there's two separate installers, not last thing, but close to last thing. Two separate installers for Inventor with model states, Inventor 22 and 23. So there's a installer for these, and there's a separate installer for these. Okay, so we have two installers now. Just because of model states, we had to do that. We had to do a lot of changes, and you can see how we had to split up the software to be able to do it, to have those two installers. Those two installers, you can install them both on the same machine. You can see here, if I go into apps, just give me a second. You can see I have the two installed here, 8.1 and 8.1. So they're both installed in here, so that's not a problem coming in that way. You go further, if I look into the so we have the two installs in here in the program files. All right, just so that we see that it's completely separate. The two installers are completely separate, but they can use the same database as long as that database isn't using Inventor models of a newer version and you're trying to run it in an older version. Well, you're going to have a problem. But if you keep it all in the older version, you can run the same database for the application database and the user database. It doesn't really matter what version it is. You can see there's at least 11 documents updated. There might have been another one or two in here. So when you're going through, I took the time to update everything. I changed the substation modeling strategy to show one with model states, just because it's significantly different. So when you go in there, you can see the other one. Eventually, levels of detail 1 will disappear, because I would imagine that people will start to getting on to 2023 and forget about their older versions. But that does take time. I know some people might be still on 2018 of Inventor. I was working with some people that were still on 2019, and let's see. That's all I have, but take a look at the documents. If you download these documents, they've changed, so maybe take a look at it. The install document has changed. You want to uninstall before you install the new version. That's one of the items that changed in that doc. Not a lot has changed other than that, just to explain otherwise, to explain that there's two databases. I'm going to move on, next page. We want some time for questions. This is my bonus Inventor model icons, model browser icons. So these icons, you can see in here, we have that circle dot between the square brackets. The solid circle means it's fully constrained in the assembly. So I thought I'd bring that up. So the solid circle means it's fully constrained in the assembly. The hyphen symbol, or a negative symbol, I would say hyphen, the status is unknown, so it doesn't know what the constraint is. So you could, I don't know how that gets placed in, or if it's a 0 or an empty circle, the component is under constraint. So I think they had a number of people asking, well, I don't know if I'm fully constrained, and you could always go and activate your number of freedoms. There's a tool to activate, and we'll show you colored images of what is fully constrained or not. Axis of freedom, but now they've added this, and that came in on 2022. So we can take some questions if you guys got some questions. There's a fair amount of stuff there I talked about, but mainly it's the model states. I think one of the key things with the model states to remember is the edit factory scope or edit member scope. I think that was the biggest thing, the testing and playing around with that. It's just to get that clear. And of course, you can do it by selecting the pencil. I can select them all, or I can select the one. And it's really nice to have. I don't believe the model states will change the performance. I think the model states is going to help the performance. So I have a question here, will model states slow down the substation master model? I don't think so. More testing would be good. If you guys ever notice that, I'd love to hear the feedback, because it could be maybe the way you do the model state too that might affect performance, but I don't think so. I think it'll be fine. And they are similar to iParts. The main difference with iParts though is that the model state is in assemblies. So maybe it's more like an iAssembly, but it's I don't really know to say the difference. I like the model state better for some reason. I never liked iParts very much. They don't like Vault as much. But really, it's a good comment. They are very similar iParts. Any other comments or questions? I think it's really going to help us with CCVTs. It's going to help us with voltage transformers, anything that we have so many different tagging for switches, you know, just to be able to reduce those number of parts inside the model. I think I can't see it slowing down performance, because once you set the model state, most often you're going to leave it at that model state. You're not going to be changing it. I think it'll be slower if you're changing the model state all the time, but you're not going to be. You're going to set it and put it in and hopefully forget about it. Peter, have you tested this in Vault? I have not. We had a in the SDSIC Inventor talks with the Autodesk guys. They were showing it with Vault. So I think that's something we could bring up in the monthly meetings with the SDSIC. We talked about that. I don't know if Josh is online. He might remember what was talked about, or Kelby. They might be able to comment more on that. Okay, next question. All the model information is contained within a single model, so depending on how any model state you have, it could slow down the top level. You would probably need a lot of model states and large complex parts for this to happen, though. Just my 2 cents. Yeah, I think there's potential, but I don't think it will slow it down. Model states are better than iAssemblies because it doesn't require a folder structure and overhead. Yeah, there you go. So that's a good point, Curtis. I like the model states so far, using them, so I'm good with them. When going from H9 H16, does the conductor cables update automatically, or do you have to return to above ground tools and update? You have to return to above ground tools and update. You have to update the cables. So if you look at the release of the 8.1, there will be a release sheet to follow on that. So if you come into the web, into here, downloads, there will be a release notes that you can go through. 8.1, oh, well, it's started to come through here. I got 8.1 here. Do I download? I think they're starting to release it. Maybe I'm in here too early. It's funny. Since model states uses one part, well, you can just replace that one instance if you want. You don't have to replace all when you're replacing parts. So if I have my assembly here, I want to replace one component, I can replace all or one. Can't do it at the higher assembly. There we go. Replace or replace all. Isn't that strange? I have it here, but I didn't have it here. I wonder if that's on all of them. Maybe it's something going on with 2023. We are on 21. We're thinking of going to Inventor 2022. Would you suggest to go to 2023? I would suggest that. I am not an Autodesk expert saying reasons why, but I would for two reasons. One is when 2022 came out, there was a number of patches to model states. So 2023 would have all those already worked into the code. So I think it's better that way. But for me specifically, is this tool here is not in 2022, these BOM settings. I want that. So I would go to 23 just for that tool. Now you notice that I have 2023 and I have the first patch out. It's a dot patch, a 0 dot patch. When I used to manage Inventor, we used to never upgrade until there was a full patch out, just to make sure we didn't have any really silly thing coming up that crashed on us. So I would normally wait for a service pack to come out before I updated it. I don't know what service, 2022, I think is that service pack 4. Yeah, Curtis, you're saying items must be used for Vault in model states. Are you sure on that? Because I had some conversations with others saying that you didn't need an item master. We're talking about item master. Maybe we're not, Curtis. Yeah, well, I had a conversation with a number of people on that, and I'm not confident that you do need it, but it wasn't clear to me. So there's a lot of people don't want item master. It's another complication with Vault, but it does other things for you that are a benefit. But again, I understood that item master may not be needed for model states, but we need clarity on that. As of 2022 release, it was the case. Oh, that's the other thing with 2022 and 2023. There is that new tool in Vault that's built into 2023 Vault, but it's not built in. You have to take it as a new add-on in 2022, and I forget what that was called. That was brought up in the SDS IC meetings last month. The linked model states work the same as the linked levels of detail, so it only links to one level down. It works the same that way. Yeah, if you start linking the model states from the top assembly, I think you could run in a complexity issue. It might be a little too complex. I'd much rather be at the smaller, in the island subassembly and the part subassembly, in case I want to use that island in another assembly. If I start pulling that island out, and I won't have those states. I want to keep it all in the island myself, the individual island. So I have that model state there, and I can use that island in any other station I bring it into. I have it all already pre-prepared. So thank you everyone for coming out. I really appreciate it. I like these, and I hope they're all helpful, and I like the questions. Questions are great.